Why focus on women and other equity-deserving groups? Before proceeding much further, it's a good idea to discuss equality, equity, and the concept of intersectionality. Equality is the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. Each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities, with the intention being that they reach an equal outcome. Because feminism is often used as an example of what it means to fight for equality or equity, we will also use it as our example. For decades, white feminists sought equality with white men. They sought equal status, rights, and opportunities in the social, political, and economic spheres. However, suffrage movements in Canada and the United States were actively racist and xenophobic and fought for the rights of only white women to vote. Suffragettes did not want Indigenous, Black, and immigrant women of color to be enfranchised. Later, from approximately the 1960s to 1980s, came second wave feminism, when white feminists fought for only white women, but not necessarily the poorest white women, to join the workforce, have the same access to higher education, and otherwise participate in society in a manner that was deemed equal to white men, all while making comparisons to how the oppression of women was the same as the oppression of Black people, without a recognition of how being a woman and being Black intersect to create different experiences and impacts of oppression. This lack of understanding was, in part, due to thinking that women, regardless of race, class, sexuality, ability, or other identities, shared a universal experience. It should be noted that while white feminists were fighting for these equal rights, women experiencing poverty, Black women, Indigenous women, immigrant women, and women of color were working, and had been for decades, to keep house for white women, as well as in dangerous and poorly paid roles with long hours and no thought about their health and well-being. It wasn't until the third wave of feminism, in approximately the 1990s, that there began to be an understanding of equity and intersectionality, which isn't to suggest that there isn't still lots of work to do.
The reason that I am this articulate is an actual story. I was jumping on the bed. I was 4 years old, and I was speaking like a 4-year-old. And my father, who is an English major, stopped me, and he said, "Jenny, the world will not take you seriously if you don't speak proper English." I remember that at 4 years old. And I learned to articulate my words. I learned to use my intellect. And I learned to work harder. But that amount of pressure on Indigenous women to be excellent at all times, to be accurate at all times, to be exact at all times, don't display emotion, especially anger. All of those things feed into how the media will draw on things, the least little negative, to tear someone apart. And unfortunately, that creates an untenable situation for actually being a human being and actually being free as an Indigenous person to be Indigenous.
One of the things that I have been really feeling into recently is this idea of our safety. As a Black woman who stands in a community where the majority around me is white faces that do not look like mine, that are white faces, I immediately am hyper vigilant. And so I had thought about why my languaging even came up in that way. And it's my sense of always having to be in this protective mode. I have to code switch, or I have to language in a way that is going to keep myself safe, and subconsciously even I'm placating. I'm offering room for wanting to be accepted. And so things like language, I'm going to say gentleman, even though this person is a perpetrator, right? And why am I not using the stronger language? It comes from a system that I know that I have to survive in on top of everything else.
Equity differs from equality through the understanding that sometimes, due to lived experience, including intergenerational trauma and various other circumstances, people require different tools, programs, and services in order to achieve what would be considered an equal outcome. For instance, many of you will have seen this image as a depiction of the difference between equality and equity. In the image, there are 3 people trying to watch a baseball game from behind a fence, and all 3 people have been given a box to stand on. The boxes are all the same size, but the people are all different heights. So the shortest person, even with a box the same size as the boxes given to the other 2 people, which is the sameness of treatment, still can't see the game, which is an unequal outcome. In the second image, the tallest person, who can see over the fence without the assistance of standing on the box, has given their box to the shortest person, so they have 2 boxes on which to stand, and they can now see the game. This is a clear depiction of people requiring different supports to achieve an equal outcome. However, what if one of the people was a user of a wheelchair or couldn't stand on the box for some other reason? Would a ramp be the answer? What if the fence was removed entirely? Or was replaced with a chain link fence that doesn't create a visual barrier to what's happening on the other side of it? Removal or replacement of the fence would get us closer to removing systemic barriers. When we consider how more than one aspect of someone's identity might create circumstances that require different solutions for people to achieve an equal result, we begin to think about intersectionality. There is no such thing as a single-issue struggle because we do not live single-issue lives. Intersectionality is the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized groups or individuals. Intersectionality helps us understand that one is not Black, then a woman, then disabled, then living in poverty, but one is a Black, disabled woman living in poverty. And the oppression that she experiences can be linked to all of these things at once. When Kimberlé Crenshaw developed the concept of intersectionality, it was in response to a court case where a woman was alleging discrimination because she was a Black woman. The judge decided that because the employer being sued employed Black men in the factory and white women in the office, there could be no discrimination. Crenshaw's point was that the judge had not considered how being Black and a woman, rather than one or the other, would lead to a different experience of discrimination than that which might be experienced by a Black man or a white woman. So, when we are seeking equity for everyone, we need to consider the ways in which gender, race, geography, class, disability, mental health status, and other forms of stigma and oppression might impact one's ability to achieve an outcome that is equal to someone who does not experience these forms of oppression.
When we're talking about the traditional sense of multiculturalism, the traditional, 1950s definition of, we celebrate everyone as they are, that's great. It does not address the intersectionalities. Like for instance, I'm in a blended family. I'm partially Hungarian, Transylvanian, Romanian. My partner is from Libya. Which community does see us? Which community embraces us? Actually, there is no space for us.
Because I'm disabled, I look at everything from the perspective of being disabled, so whether it's getting somewhere for dinner, something as easy as going to a restaurant. Can I get in there? Is there a step up? Are the tables too high? Is it this, that, the other? Not even thinking about people who have dietary restrictions, but it's more about the physical space for me. So I look at everything I do with that sort of physical aspect. Even, being someone in a wheelchair, I can't go as many places as some of my colleagues can. So while they're all amazing and I absolutely love where I work, they are always willing to cover something for me if they have to. But I hate the fact that they have to, because I should be able to go everywhere, but I can't because transportation is hard when you're in a big 300-pound motorized wheelchair. And if transportation is hard, imagine how much harder it is when you do all that work to get there, and then there's 3 big stone steps to get in. So all of it is much more difficult. So when I'm writing a story, first of all, I can't take a story if it's a new business story and I can't get in. That's one that I think of immediately. But then if I'm writing a story about gender-based violence, I can't help but put myself in the position of the person who has been attacked, because not only am I a woman, but I'm a disabled girl. So I have a bone disorder, which makes me weaker than other people. So maybe she is bruised, and I'm saying that's awful, but I would die. And that is the case for a lot of disabled people. I think I saw a statistic somewhere that disabled people are 3 times more likely to be the victims of abuse than our able-bodied counterparts. And that is because so often so many of our issues get sort of swept under the rug. Is just like, well, you're lucky you have someone taking care of you anyway. Well, you're lucky. So I always, I can't help but put myself in those situations when I read about them. And I will be honest with you, it does make me largely more fearful. Here I am, 28 years old, and I'm never going to be married, and I'm never going to do do any of that because I can't help but read those headlines and put myself in that position and know that I would die.
Why is all of this important? Because if we focus on the pursuit of equality between people, providing them with the exact same resources and programming and treating them the exact same way, we will neglect to ensure that there is equality in outcomes. So why focus on women and other equity-deserving groups with this training program? It is true that men experience violence and that some men are not seen as equal to other men. In every instance discussed in this training program, from sexual violence to intimate partner violence, to online harassment, to who is seen as expert by the media, it is women, Indigenous, Black, and racially marginalized people, disabled people, people living in poverty, and gender and sexually diverse people who experience more frequent and more severe forms of violence or inequality, particularly if one identifies with more than one equity-deserving group.
Look, I think there's a base level of harassment that journalists just live with day to day now. And it's deeply unfortunate for all kinds of reasons. And one of which is we play this particular role in a democratic society in terms of informing the public and holding people of power to account. And a lot of this is designed to try to get us to stop doing that job for whatever the motive is of the person who's doing it. But as I said before, there's sort of levels of this, right? Women tend to get it worse than the men. People of color get it worse than Caucasian reporters. And then if you check all the boxes, if you are a female and a visible minority, for instance, you're just going to get it a whole lot worse. So the harassers will target their sexual identity, or try to. They will target their racial identity, usually with racial epithets and so on. There was a couple ugly incidences last year with some folks in Toronto where the target also happened to be Muslim. And so a lot of it, I mean, really like old school, Islamophobia, you must be a terrorist, or making fun of the fact that they may wear a headscarf or something. I mean, it just escalates. They pick on any little thing that they know will make the target feel unsafe.
In every single instance, cisgender, heterosexual, non-disabled white men may experience some of these issues. However, they never fare as badly as women and other equity-deserving people, and the margin between cisgender, heterosexual, non-disabled white men and everyone else is vast. Data from Statistics Canada tells us that while men do experience intimate partner violence, women and gender and sexually diverse people are disproportionately impacted by the most severe forms of intimate partner violence, and that regardless of the gender of the victim, the perpetrator is most likely to be a man. Overall, 44% of women and 36% of men report having experienced intimate partner violence at some point since they were 15 years old. However, women suffer the most severe and injurious forms of intimate partner violence, including being more likely to be murdered by their intimate partner. Data from UNESCO indicates that a partner or ex-partner commits 38% of murders against women, compared to 5% against men. Statistics Canada data tells us that of solved cases, 47% of women who were femicide victims in 2019 were killed by their intimate partner, and 6% of men who were homicide victims were killed by their intimate partner. And we know from other data that 55% of intimate partner violence involving same-sex partners involved a male victim and a male accused. Of the intimate partner murders that occurred from 1998 to 2017 between same-sex partners, 86% of them included a male victim and a male offender. None of this is to suggest that intimate partner violence perpetrated by women is not a problem. Rather, regardless of the sex of the victim survivor, perpetrators are overwhelmingly men. In terms of online harassment experienced by journalists, an Ipsos survey found that 72% of media workers had experienced some form of harassment while doing their work over the last year. Women, younger people, racially marginalized people, and gender and sexually diverse people face disproportionately more online harassment than other groups, cisgender, heterosexual, middle-aged white men. And the harassment takes more severe and personal tones. In a nationwide study of media workers released in May 2022, it was found that rates of harassment are increasing. Non-binary and transgender people are more likely than other groups to experience online harassment. Women encountered harassment and violence at every turn, by email, on social media, in the field, and in the newsroom. And women were more likely to be sexually harassed, be on the receiving end of hate speech, and be threatened and intimidated. Again, harassment was more prevalent for women, younger workers, racially marginalized workers, and gender and sexually diverse workers. And most harassment took the form of sexualized messages or images, physical threats, or comments related to gender identity, ethnicity, or nationality, making the harassment personal rather than being legitimate criticism of the target's work. All of this drives home the point that gender-based violence is rooted in historically unequal power relations between men and women, and due to a patriarchal system that results in domination-based relationships with men as those who are dominant. When we move from gender-based violence to the realities of gender equality in media representation, it has been found that the expertise of women has historically been marginalized and undervalued, and that in the 10-year time period between 2005 and 2015, less than 20% of experts or commentators involved in news coverage were women. Other research has found that less than 1/4 of news stories broadcast or written include women, and women are fewer than 15% of quoted experts. Even when discussing gender equality, men are more likely to be featured in stories than women. So, how can we do better? When discussing with Tom McConnell, talk show host and assistant program director at News Talk 610 CKTB, the issue of being challenged by "what about the men" types of questions in response to undertaking work to eliminate gender-based violence, he gave this example, speaking in gender binary terms.
There are some cancers, uterine cancer is a female-only cancer. Prostate cancer is a male-only cancer. Breast cancer, you bring up, oh, men can get breast cancer too. Yeah, oh, okay. 98% of breast cancer is women. And if we solve that, we probably solve male breast cancer as well.
Right? It's a
Like, it's not, and if we don't, it's like, that is unbelievable. Male breast cancer is nothing. It's like a completely different mechanism and genes, and who knew? Like, it would be even more fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. If it's so overwhelmingly one side, we can probably, with insights and knowledge, and we can probably fix the small little bit on the other side.
Yeah.
And if we can't, that is remarkable.
Key takeaways. Systems of patriarchy, misogyny, racism, colonialism, ableism, and other forms of oppression result in disproportionate impacts of gender-based violence on women and gender and sexually diverse people. These same systems of oppression result in the underrepresentation or misrepresentation of women and gender and sexually diverse people in all aspects of media work and reporting.